Hey, what's up guys? My name is Praetorian and welcome back to my Hearts of Iron 4 beginner guide. Now in this video we're going to be covering navies. We're going to be covering naval units, naval fleets, we're going to cover naval invasions, and then we're also going to go ahead and cover supply because they're kind of associated with this, and this is one of the more difficult things to understand and a lot of people have asked about it. So those are the topics we're going to be covering, and it's kind of a lot, so let's go ahead and get started. Now you probably already noticed that we got planes flying around, we got ships, out there patrolling, and we have already have our units that have their battle plans already. World War II has started, guys, and that is so that I can show you a few things in the battle. First, we're going to talk about naval units. We're going to talk about all the different types of ships that there are available for you to build and make use in your wars. Now there are two types of screens available for you to build. We have destroyers and then we have light cruisers. Let's go ahead and take a look at the combat stats for ships as we did with the land units. Just quickly define these. Tooltips do a good job, but just make sure that everything is understood here. The first thing you're going to notice here with the destroyer is that they are very, very cheap to make. You can pump out destroyers by the dozens. That's one of the main advantages to these destroyers. You see that their service manpower is only 200. That's how much manpower is required to build this, and the production cost is only 1,400, which is the lowest that you're going to find amongst ships, besides the submarine, which is 1,100. Now, first rating here is sub detection. That's the main thing that screens are going to be doing for you, or one of their key things that they're going to do is they're going to detect and find subs and kill them. So our first rating here is sub detection. You will see that destroyers are very, very, very good at that. They also have a depth charge attack, which is very good as well. Now you see their fire range. That's how far they're able to fire, and we'll get to take a look at that when we take a look at naval combat later in the video. And remember, this is their main gun, so this does not apply to the torpedo attack. Now, one of the advantages to screens is that they carry torpedoes. Now these torpedoes definitely increase the overall attack ability of our screens. The problem with torpedoes is that you have to be very, very, very close to use them. Next we have naval firepower. That is the damage of our main guns. As you see, it's very low for destroyers. They also have some anti-air ability, max range, pretty self-explanatory. Piercing, your ability to pierce armor just like land units. Surface detection, your ability to detect ships that are on the water, not underwater, the ones that are on the surface. And your surface visibility, this is how easy it is to find your destroyer, which of course is a smaller ship, so it's relatively difficult to find compared to the larger ships. Also have a very good evasion rate. Now this is one important thing about evasion, is not only is it your ability to not get hit, to avoid being hit, but as the tooltip will show you, it's also your ability to hit ships with high evasion ratings. Now, we went over depth charges. That's for attacking submarines. Port capacity usage, we'll go into that later. Max speed. One important thing to note about max speed is that your fleet, the speed of your fleet is the speed of your slowest unit. So this is one reason, and that we'll be going into why you may not want to bring submarines into your main fleet. Here's your HP, basically your strength. And then of course you have your reliability rating. So we very easily can see what destroyers are good for. One, they're very, very easy to build. Two, they are very, very good at detecting and destroying submarines. And three, they do add a few other things. They can do a little bit of damage, especially with their torpedoes if they can get up close. And then also they provide the anti-air here. So what's the difference between our other choice of screens, light cruisers? You'll automatically notice that cruisers are going to take triple the amount of manpower. They're also way more production costs, so they are more expensive to build. You also notice their sub detection is much, much lower, as is their depth charges. Their depth charges is a fraction of the depth charge of the destroyer as well, and you'll notice the detection is also way lower. So what we get from this is light cruisers are not even close to as capable at finding and defeating submarines as destroyers. Another negative to the light cruiser compared to the destroyer is they have a lower evasion rate and they are much slower. So we've talked about the negatives. What about the positives? What does a light cruiser provide? Well, first of all, they are just more powerful. They have a longer range. They are better with their naval firepower, double what the destroyer is. Their torpedo attack is much higher, and they provide a much better anti-air ability for your fleet. They have a better piercing attack, and they have more strength. So you can kind of tell the difference between these destroyers. They're going to be very, very good at helping you detect other ships when you're looking for them, so you definitely want to have some in your fleet. And they're very, very good at fighting submarines, another reason why you're going to want to have them. While the light cruisers just can't do those type of things as well. However, they are much sturdier and can do a lot more damage. So So really which one to choose for you to focus on if you can't afford to build both is really going to depend on which country you're playing as well as who you're fighting. If you're fighting a country that has a lot of submarines, then you're probably going to want to focus on the destroyers. Now next up we have our smallest capital ship. Now this capital ship is the heavy cruiser. Now there are a few stats on here that we didn't see with the screens. For instance, armor. Neither one of the screens have any armor. And armor functions with the piercing the same way that it does for land units. Then you also see that we have a shore bombardment, how much of a bonus they contribute to land combat when they're helping by bombarding from the sea. Now, if we compare the heavy cruisers to the battleships, you're going to see what you're going to expect when you compare a small ship with a much larger ship. Basically, the small ship is going to have a much smaller port capacity usage, they're going to have higher evasion, and they're going to be a lot faster. But in almost every other category, the battleship is going to reign supreme. They just have a very high range, they have very good firepower, their anti-air is higher, their armor is higher, the piercing is higher. I mean, everything else is better in that category other than those few things. So other than the speed advantage, you may be wondering, why would you ever get heavy cruisers? Well, here's the number right here. This is all you need to know. This production cost is massive. It takes quite a bit of investment to be able to build battleships. I mean, especially when you compare them to this heavy cruiser here, which is only 5,800. I mean, that is ridiculous. That is almost triple the amount. And really, that's the main reason why you would be building heavy cruisers over battleships, unless you're specifically looking for a speedier component, is just because of production. That's about it. And over here you'll see that we have battle cruisers. Now battle cruisers are sort of like a blend between the heavy cruiser and the battleship in the fact that they are a bit smaller than the battleship, and we should be comparing to maybe this O class instead, because this is the older battle cruiser, so the stats look a lot worse than the battleship. I should note that you do see little arrows here, green arrows and red arrows, showing you what has been impacted by this over here when I chose who I was going to be having designing my ships. So this is not showing the base numbers, they are being affected, the speed, the surface visibility, and the firepower. But in essence, battle cruisers are not as heavily armored as battleships. They don't have as much HP, but they are a lot easier to produce, and they have several advantages. First off, they are faster, a lot faster. They're not as visible on the surface, and then they have very good range. The range is actually the same as this battleship here, although not the same as the equivalent battleship over here, but pretty close. And their firepower really is not that bad. Certainly better than our heavy cruisers over here. So when it comes down to it, if you have the production and the ability, the resources to do so, battleships are really the ultimate ones if you're not looking for something that's fast. If you do have production troubles or you are looking to build something that's a little bit faster, then you're going to want to go with the battle cruiser or the heavy cruiser. Now the last capital ship is the carrier. Now, carriers have very little ability to fight on their own. Instead, their benefit is, of course, in the airplanes. They provide a mobile deck for your airplanes, and they are very good, especially when you throw some naval planes on there, which are currently overpowered and probably going to get nerfed soon. So if carriers are properly protected by screens and even other capital ships, you'll see that they are actually one of the best ships that you can have due to the fact how powerful planes are. Of course, that is realistic with history. And then finally, we have the submarines. Submarines are very slow, guys. This is the main reason why you do not want to put them in your main fleets. They can certainly help out. There are advantages to having them in your fleet, but just the fact by how much they decrease your fleet speed, I would suggest that you don't use submarines for that. Instead, what submarines are best at doing is hunting down convoys. That's really the optimum mission that you should be using your submarines for, and they are devastating against capital ships if capital ships do not have any screens. The problem is how many fleets are going to have capital ships without screens. Alright, so that covers the unit types, guys. Naval units are a little bit easier to cover than the land units. Now, I did have quite a few people on some of the previous videos ask how to produce ships, and this may seem a bit confusing. Some of us who played the game for a while, it may seem really simple, but they're not produced the way that you're going to recruit and deploy land units, so I can see how it might be a little bit confusing, but they are constructed in the same way that equipment is here in your production screen. You're going to go ahead and select whatever ship you want, pick them, and do the same thing you do with any other equipment, except for you're going to assign them naval dockyards instead of military factories. Now you notice all of our ships are set to auto. If you hover over that, it's going to tell you exactly where they're going to deploy when they're done. However, that might not be where you want them to deploy. You can always go ahead and click that and then pick whichever port you would like them to deploy in once they're done. So I want these, I think I got the submarine selected. I want them to deploy right there. And then when they're done building, then that's where they will be located. Now let's go ahead and take a look at one of our fleets here. Now, I currently have a fleet patrolling out here. Where are they at? Oh, that is one way to find a ship. You know, if you don't know where yours at, where to click on them, you can just go ahead and select right here, and it's going to show you all the fleets that you have assigned to missions in this area. If we were to go into sea zones, this is the Baltic Sea area. And it'll show you all your fleets, and we go ahead and select them. Now we have this fleet doing the patrol mission. Now I know I've already covered these missions in a previous video, guys, but I'm gonna go ahead and run over them just real quick again for those of you that did not see that video. Now these first two missions is where you task your Navy at finding the enemy and destroying them. The difference between the two missions is their formation spread. With the patrol, you're gonna have a very wide formation spread, while with search and destroy, you're gonna have a tight one. Now what the difference between these two is the spread determines how many of your ships arrive in battle once battle commences. So with the patrol, you're very wide, so you're going to have an easier time at finding the enemy. That's the main advantage to the patrol, is that you can find the enemy ships easier. However, once combat starts, you'll see that you only have a few of your ships there in the battle, and the rest have to arrive, which sometimes can be critical. And then with the next mission, Search and Destroy, it's the exact opposite. Your fleet stays closer together, so it is more difficult to find the enemy fleets. However, when combat commences, more of your ships will be ready to engage the enemy at the same time. Now these next two have to do with convoys. You have convoy raiding, which is where you're going to attempt to raid and destroy the enemy's convoys. And any fleet set to this will attempt to avoid combat with non-convoy fleets. However, of course, if they are convoy raiding, they will engage with the convoy escorts. And then, of course, the next one mission is convoy escort, and this is where you're going to escort your convoys. If anybody attempts to raid, then your ships will engage them and attempt to destroy them in order to protect your convoys. Now, another thing that fleets can do that don't actually have a particular mission is they can help your land units out with shore bombardment. And we looked at that stat earlier in the video. Some units are much better at it than others, but the gist of it is that capital ships are the ones that can provide shore bombardment, and the bigger capital ship with the better guns can provide better bombardment. Now, the way that you get the bombardment bonus, which they can't really necessarily do damage to the units. Instead, they're going to provide a combat bonus for when your units are engaged with the enemy. So if we were to set a fleet in here, we would get a bonus if these two were engaging each other based upon which ships we have there and how many of them and how good they are at providing shore bombardment. And they do not need to be on a mission, guys. When you're doing shore bombardment, you're just going to be on the hold mission. That's it. And it says that here in the tooltip, capital ships place a hold in a sea province, neighboring land battle will be able to help out with shore bombardment. Let's take a look at some of the other stuff that's on this screen here. Of course, we can assign naval commanders, but that can only be done in a port. So we could assign one to our U-boats here. This one, why not? And we would want to look and find a Seawolf one. These are the best ones for submarines. They give a submarine attack bonus. And I've said this in a previous video, but unlike generals, admirals do not have a field marshal equivalent. They can control as many ships as you assign to them. There is no stacking bonus, unlike Hearts of Iron 3, so you could build massive doom stack navies with really no penalty. The only thing that is limiting the size of your navies is your ports. Now, if we hover over this port here, you'll see that it's a naval base 8, and you'll see your capacity. Our capacity is 80. Now, we already saw this when we were looking at the ship combat stats, but let's go ahead and take a look at it again here. Port capacity usage. Each submarine is going to take 0.5. You saw that our screens took up 1, and that we were looking, I think it was the battleship, took up 2. Once you go over a naval base's capacity, you're storing too many ships there, you're going to start getting a negative modifier associated with the repair speed of your naval fleets. And it can get so low if you go so far over the capacity where the repair ability will be at 0%, meaning that your ships will not repair at all in that naval port. And of course, another factor to be considered is supply. Your naval ships will need supply and that they'll get out of their home base. And the more ships you have there, the more supply they're going to need. So those are two limiting factors, although overall you can have some pretty large fleets in this game, especially when compared to Hearts of Iron 3. Now, the next thing we'll see is formation spread. Now, you can see this unit's really spread out, 160%, because they're set on the patrol mission. The next thing here is their home port. Now, the way that you change a ship's home port is, of course, it says here on the tooltip, you're going to press Control and then right-click on a port. Next to that, we're going to see the mission that they're currently conducting and where they're doing it. They're doing patrol in the Baltic Sea. Now, this is the repair priority. We can have it at low, medium, or high. This is when they go back to repair damage. Of course, we can also have them never repair. Now, this is an interesting little thing here. You can have an automatic split off. It's currently disabled. If you were to enable this, then your damaged ships would be able to basically break away from this current fleet, go back to port and repair, and then come back to the fleet. Now, as stated in the tooltip, the negative of this is that your damaged ships could be intercepted on their way home and destroyed. And then this button here will let you just send them to repair to their home port right now. This is their current engagement rule. You can have it fire at will, or you can have a do not engage. Now, one thing to note is that when you have fire at will and you have them on the convoy rating, they are still not going to attack any ship that is located in their sea zone. They're still going to attempt to just raid convoys. So you do want to have that fire at will on. And then we have the create new fleet button here. Now, creating new fleets is very easy. You just click on this here, and then you could separate all submarines. If we had different types, we could separate all of a type, that type of ship. Or we could also just select one or two of these ships. You can see that we have a new ship here, and every one we're selecting. Now, another way to move ships in between fleets, and this is one of the easier ways, is to just pick up and drag whichever one you want to do. And in this case, we're picking up the submarine, and we're doing one submarine at a time. Or we could do all submarines. Now, when discussing naval fleets, one of the key questions I see come up all the time, everybody's always asking, is fleet composition. And really, there's no real easy way to answer this. You know, we did already cover the fact that you can basically have doom stacks, very large fleets, as long as it doesn't go above this maximum capacity for your naval base. And really, that's kind of the optimal way to do it, because when it comes to having really big fleets against really small fleets, of course, other things are factored in, like what kind of ships you have, how good they are, as well as their experience and all that kind of things, or technology. But when it comes down to it, the big fleet is usually going to win. So you're probably going to want to have large fleets. Now, if you're covering several different areas, for instance, if you're Britain, then you can't put your entire navy in one fleet, even if you could support it. You would have to cover the Mediterranean. You'd probably need one for Asia. I'm playing a UK campaign right now. I have one main one for up here in Europe. I have another big large one here in the Mediterranean, and then I have another large one here in Asia to deal with the Japanese. Now, the only real reason to have separate fleets in an area is so that you can send them on different missions. So you'd want to have your submarines in separate fleets for the reasons that we discussed earlier. Those submarines would, you'd probably set those on convoy rating. Then I would also create several small fleets of destroyers, maybe 10 to 20 destroyers, maybe even larger. You could also throw other screens in there, some light cruisers, and you could then have fleets that have a couple capital ships, maybe your heavy cruisers or maybe a battle cruiser, and those ones would be used for smaller areas. For instance, if you maybe had some possessions in the Caribbean that you needed to protect, or you wanted to protect your convoys going around Africa, or for whatever reason you may have smaller fleets for those purposes. And I would also suggest that you create several fleets, small to medium size, for convoy escorts, probably going to be largely made up of screens. And you're going to want those convoy escorts anywhere where you have convoys running. Now, this is something I can't really show that well with Germany. It'd be better to be the UK here. But you'll see the little arrows here, and this shows you where your supply is going. So these convoys here, they're going to transport supplies to anywhere where you might have troops. For instance, that one there is going to take troops all the way to our allies areas here in Ethiopia. Now, even though we don't have troops there, they still have the lines there, and you'll notice that we're not using any convoys. They're not actually escorting any supplies, but if we did have troops there, they would be doing that, and we would need to protect it. Same here, we have another one going there, as well as this one. This one we actually are using. As you'll see, we're using 2 convoys to transport supplies over to our troops over in this area here, because they are not connected by land, and we'll go over supply a little bit later in the video. So you would want to have a convoy escort in any area where you would have supply actually going through, if that area, of course, is at risk for attack by your enemies. So as I said, there really isn't a really good fleet composition to tell you where like this is the optimum fleet composition. What I will tell you is that you do need to have screens, and we're going to be covering that when we go over the naval combat. You do need to have screens, and there are several reasons, and I'll talk about it there. But roughly, at the very least, you're going to want 2 screens for every capital ships. But really, that is not enough. I would suggest you have like 4 to 5 screens for every capital ship that you have, and even that probably would, there would be no problem adding more screens. Alright, so let's go ahead and move along to Naval Invasions. Now, I did mention this in a previous video, or towards the end of a previous video. However, there were a few things that I left out that are kind of really important to when it comes to Naval Invasions. I think the last video I only really covered how to do them. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and select our unit here. I think I've assigned them a couple of different units down there, and they're going to enact a naval invasion of this Polish coast right here. Now, in order to set a naval invasion, you're just going to select this button right here, and then you need to left click the port that you want them to leave from. And then you need to right click, which I don't know why Paradox has the left click, right click. It doesn't make any sense. But then you're going to go ahead and right click where you want them to invade. We want them to invade right there. And now you're going to see how many divisions we have assigned to that. They have 0 transports, and that's because they have not actually assembled them yet. Now you see we have a reserved convoy, 0 of 9, so we're going to need 9 convoys to be able to escort these troops over there. And then also we would want to make sure our invasion is fully prepared. It'll take 21 days. Now, I didn't cover the whole convoy part in the last video, but I did cover how to do this. But a few things I didn't mention is there's 3 key things that you have to do in order to be able to enact a naval invasion. Now, the first thing is you have to have the convoys available. This one requires 9 convoys, so we have to have 9 convoys up here that they can use. Now, the other thing you need to have is naval supremacy, and it's kind of a 2-part, which is why I said 3 things. Now, we're going to go ahead and change over to our naval unit, which, by the way, I use all these buttons here, but you're going to want to, when you're playing this game, you're going to want to know the hotkeys for these different buttons. F1's land, F2's naval, F3's air. You want to know that at the very least, but it all goes all the way up to F9 for all these other buttons. But yeah, I click them so that you guys can see what I'm doing here. But yeah, we got our naval one activated here, and we hover over the Baltic Sea. You're going to see our naval supremacy rating is 110.30%. Now, the reason for that is because we have friendly ships patrolling the area, 11 ships, friendly ships patrolling the area, no enemy ships, and we have air superiority. And this is the 2 parts that you're going to need in order to enact your naval invasion. You have to have ships patrolling. You won't be able to do it without having ships patrolling all the areas that your invasion is going to be going through. Now, in this case, we're only going through 1 sea area, so this is the only area that we have to patrol. You also have to have the air superiority over this area, which means that you're going to want to assign your fleet, your planes to the Baltic Sea, which I've already done. So if you looked at the Baltic Sea, you'll see that I have planes here, and they are conducting the air superiority mission, our heavy fighters and our fighters. So a lot of people have expressed having trouble enacting their invasion fleets, and so far it has always been one of those 3 reasons. Either 1, they were not patrolling, 2, they didn't have the convoys, or 3, they didn't have the air superiority. And that's essentially all you need to know about naval invasions. As soon as this guy has all his convoys and has got his invasion planned, we can go ahead and click that button, and they'll go over there and invade that for us. Now, next, I want to go ahead and cover naval battles. Now, I went ahead and already sent my fleet out really stupidly out to the British here. I would not do this in game. I did try and create a larger fleet, though. I did forget to give them an admiral, and I set them on a search and destroy mission to ensure that the whole fleet would get there as quick as possible, hopefully. And I knew if I sent them to the channel that they would find some British fleets eventually, and they did relatively quickly. Now, like I said, unfortunately, I forgot to assign a commander, but this is good that this is not a real game. And as I said, if this was a real game, I wouldn't have done this in the first place. Now, this is the Naval Battle Statistics screen. Now, this is an interesting little picture here that will show you the time of day. It's night in this case. It'll also show you if there's any weather. And weather is going to have several effects, both on your ships, but most importantly, it's going to affect your planes quite a bit. And you'll also notice that for the night modifiers, that the planes do not fly off of carriers at night. So if you have carriers, they're completely ineffective at nighttime. And we see our two admirals on the side here with their stats. Obviously, they don't have an admiral there. This is, who's winning. Then we have the middle zone here, and this is where the combat actually goes on. Now, these areas, this is our side, and this is the enemy side. Now, these are the ships that are still attempting to arrive at combat. They have not arrived there yet. And this was the point that I was bringing up when I was talking about the different missions. If you were on patrol, you would have less ships than you would if you're doing search and destroy missions. Now, this is where naval range is going to play a part. Naval range is going to determine how far your ship can fire in order to hit the enemy ships. The closer you are to the middle, the closer you are to the enemies. So if you're trying to use torpedo weapons, you would have to get all the way up here to the middle, basically. You'll also notice that your screen ships, in order to do damage to the enemy, are going to also need to get much closer, while your capital ships can fire from much farther away. And how far they can fire depends on their individual fire range. Now, looking at this combat here, you'll see that we have 2 light cruisers and 5 destroyers that are in the battle, and then they have 1 heavy cruiser and 5 light cruisers. Now, before this starts, because I don't know if they're going to run away and how long this battle is going to last, one thing I like to point out is I did put submarines in this, even though I told you guys not to, that it's not optimal. And the only reason why I did that is so I can show you this. If you see this, it's like a little eyeball in here. This tells you if the enemy can detect the ship or not. So they may know that you have submarines, but they do not know your exact position. If they don't know your exact position, they can't attack you. And this is where that stat comes into play when we looked at destroyers and the sub detection stat. So if our subs were here in battle, they could not be detected. This actually gives them like a sneak attack bonus, and it's very, very good against capital ships. So they do, like I was saying, they do have some positives to being in the fleet, but they probably are going to have, well, they have light ships. They actually don't have any destroyers, so they may have trouble detecting our submarines. But if they had destroyers, they'd probably detect them, and then they could probably destroy them before we would be able to do any damage to their capital ships. So let's go ahead and let this battle play out. We're not going to pay attention to what's happening in the land war. Now, up above in these corners, this is where you're going to see the planes that are participating in the combat. Now, I sent our naval bombers from somewhere over here to come and help out with this combat. So we have 108 naval bombers that are assisting us. And you can already see just how overpowered these things are. They have already done a massive amount of damage. The battle just started, and they've already done quite a bit of damage to this heavy cruiser. I'm going to tell you right now, guys, that the naval bombers are very powerful right now. So as the day progresses, which you can see, it is now daytime, the ships are now closing in so that they can do more damage against our ships. You'll notice that our ships are staying in the back. Why are they not closing in to attack the enemy? The main reason is because they are waiting for the rest of our fleet. The AI knows that they are outmatched. There are 10 ships here, and there's only 7 of ours. So therefore, you'll see that they are currently waiting for the rest of the fleet. And we can already see that we lost one of our planes. We can see which one of these. It looks like it was actually the heavy cruiser that shot down the plane. And now it looks like they moved forward a little bit. Yeah, it looks like they are now engaging the enemy. Now, as our ships arrive, they'll move towards the center and begin doing more and more damage to the enemy. Now, once battle has commenced, you can hover over any one of these units and see who they are engaging. Now, you'll notice that our light cruisers are engaging the enemy's light cruisers. Alright, so you're going to go ahead and see that we have sunk their light cruiser. However, it looks like the British have reinforced. Yeah, they have the battleship. Yeah, they have a carrier down here. And this is bringing all these different planes in here to shoot down ours, as well as to start doing serious damage to our ships. And we expected the Royal Navy to get here. And as you can see, they're closing in. And our fleet is now disengaging. As they move to the back, that means that this fleet is attempting to disengage from the enemy. Alright, so I've fast forwarded through this just a little bit here, and you'll notice they still do not know the exact position of our submarines yet. You'll also be able to see when you're hovering over this exactly what has happened with the ships. This submarine has received 1 critical hit. You'll notice that this ship here has damaged several ships on this side. Now, if you look, that we are clearly losing this battle, which is obvious. The British do outclass us when it comes to our navies, and we are basically losing all of our ships. Now, once the naval battle has finished up, you're going to get this little thing on the map here that's going to show you what has happened in this battle. You can click on that, or you can click up here, and it's going to take you to it if you're not at this location. And when you click on it, it's going to show you which ships were destroyed in that battle. And then you can get more statistics by clicking on that. Just way more stats than you're probably ever going to want. And that is how naval battle works, guys. Alright, so the last thing that we're going to cover in this video is supply. Now, to look at the supply map mode, you just click F4, or you can click on this button over here, and it's going to show you all the supply areas. Now, the way the supply works is there's two values that are considered in each one of these supply areas. There's a local supply, and then there's incoming supply. Now, the local supply is a supply that this particular area produces all on its own. It starts with a base supply. Now, you'll notice, like if we were to go all the way down here to the desert, you notice that deserts do not give any negative modifiers to supply. Instead, this is done with the base supply. Basically, the developers have assigned a base supply unit for each area, and that's largely based off the terrain as well as just many other factors, historical factors that have to do with the map. So you'll see over here in this desert supply area, the base supply is only, local supply base is only 4, while if we were to go up to, Germany here, we're going to see a local supply base of 13. Another thing that contributes to local supply is victory points. Every victory point in that supply area is going to increase the local supply by 1. So you're seeing that we're going to total a local supply of 22, and that's the 13 plus the victory points, which is total of 9 to equal up a local supply of 22. And then that number 114.48, that's how much supply you have in this area for your units. Now, right above that, you're going to see how much supply is actually required. We require 14.9. Our Army, our Navy, and our Air Force all require supply. Now, in this case, we're requiring 14.9 just for our Army. You also see that Allied armies will also put a strain on your supply as they require supply as well. Now, I told you that there's two parts to supply. There's local supply and then incoming supply. Now, this is our capital supply region, so we don't have an incoming supply rate because incoming supply is the supply that comes from your capital. So if we were to go to one of the neighboring supply regions, you're going to see that we do have the incoming supply rate, which you see is 92.48, and that fits with the infrastructure of our supply region of our capital region, which is 92.48. So this is how incoming supply works, and it works in two different ways depending on whether it's land supply that's coming across land, or supply that's coming across the water. The supply that's coming from your capital, that 92.48, is half the average infrastructure of that supply area squared. So just increasing your infrastructure in your capital is going to drastically increase your supply across land. So you see, it can therefore be very beneficial to increase the infrastructure in your capital supply area. Now, as we move along through our different supply areas, you're going to see that our supply arrow is moving through a predetermined area that you can't really control how the supply is going to go through, and it's got to come all the way from your capital. So if we're looking at here, that supply has got to come through all these provinces here. Now, at this point, our incoming supply is still 92.48, what we're getting from the capital. You'll see that when we move into Italy, that our incoming supply has dropped to 68. It's not as high. And if we were to go into the Balkans, we'll see that it drops even further, 60.5 there, and then we're at 34.71. Now, why is that? That's because incoming supply also factors in the average infrastructure of the current area that's receiving. So, therefore, the infrastructure in these supply areas is much lower, therefore the incoming supply is a lot lower. For those of you who do care about the math, basically what it is half of the average infrastructure of the sending area squared plus 2 times the average infrastructure of the receiving area squared. And that's how you get the incoming supply by land. Now, sea supply works quite a bit differently. Sea supply is entirely based off of the naval bases where the supply is being sent out and where it has been receiving. The game takes the smallest one, so in this case we have a naval base 6, but on this side we have a naval base 5, and this is the receiving one, so the game's going to take that naval base 5 and use that for all the math for supply because it takes the smallest one between the receiving one and the sending port. So with the smallest naval base being 5, we're going to multiply that by 3 to get what our incoming supply is. And you'll look, 3 times 5 is 15, and incoming supply is 15. And remember, guys, it's the smallest port between the receiving and the sending port. Now, a few things that you need to know about supply. Moving units consume extra supply. If a unit has no supply, it'll increase their attrition. That means that their equipment's going to be breaking down. They're also going to face a decreased recovery rate. They're going to get a negative combat modifier, which is really bad. And then the worst hit is to organization. Their organization is going to drop quite a bit. In essence, guys, if your unit is out of supply and that 48-hour grace period has ended, they're going to be very, very easily destroyed. Now that 48-hour grace period does allow you to hopefully get supply to that unit before they run out. Now, one of the key units that is going to have trouble with this is the airborne units. You drop airborne paratroopers behind enemy lines, and then they don't have any supply to supply themselves. So that means that you have 2 days to figure out that supply situation before those paratroopers finally run out of supply. So if we were to drop paratroopers, say, back here behind the Polish lines to take these victory points. Now, in some cases, we could take over a port that could supply our troops. For instance, if we were dropping over here, maybe we could take that port and then supply those troops. But in this case, obviously, there is no port. However, you can still get supply from the local supply. So taking over cities and victory points will enable your paratroopers to be able to supply themselves. But yeah, the key thing to know here is that you got to get your paratroopers moving. You got to get them doing something so that they can supply themselves. So how to keep supply going. Now let's say that I'm Germany here, and I wanted to go over here and conquer Stockholm, conquer Sweden, because I wanted to march into the Paradox Interactive's office and demand that they give me a copy of whatever game they're secretly working on, I'm sure. So I wanted to conquer Sweden to get hold of Paradox games, because that would be a legitimate reason to conquer Sweden, I think. So I'm planning a naval invasion force. Now, we already went over how to do that. Well, I'm going to want to take a major port to supply my units. Now, this naval base here, I can't see the size. This is something you would want to know, what the size of this naval base is, and if this is going to be big enough to supply. Because a local supply can be very, very hard, and land supply, the incoming land supply, all that can be very, very hard to factor in. When it comes to naval supply, it's very, very easy, just 3 times the naval base. So you know exactly how much supply you're going to be able to provide to your troops. Now, we can easily find out how much supply any unit is going to require. Just clicking on here, and then you'll notice that there's a stat here, supply use, 0.81. That's how much supply this infantry division is going to require. Now, if we looked at maybe one of these armored ones, you'll see they require 1.29, so they require quite a bit more supply to be able to operate effectively. So if you wanted to do the math, you could do that. You could factor in, figure out how much supply you're going to need, and know that you need a naval base that can supply your troops there with just the simple math of multiplying 3 times whatever the naval base size is. So how do we increase supply? Well, obviously for naval supply, we just need to increase the size of our naval bases. If we're doing naval invasions, then we need to capture bigger and larger naval ports to keep our troops supplied. Also need to capture cities to get that local supply. And we're going to want to build our infrastructure up, especially in our capital area, and anywhere that we need to supply troops. It's good to have the infrastructure there. And remember, it uses the average, so you don't have to build all the provinces up. It's based on the average of all the provinces in that supply area. So I hope that answers many of your guys' questions, whether it's about the naval invasions, whether it's about supply. These are very complicated topics, especially supplies, and so much of it goes on under the hood. So if you have any questions, then please go ahead and feel free to leave them in the comments section. I try and reply to every comment if I can, and I can try and help you out with any problems that you may have understanding this, because I know I haven't covered absolutely everything in this video, but I just see this video is already really, really long. But I hope that you guys did get the gist of it, and remember, feel free to ask me any questions that you may have regarding any of these topics or other ones that I didn't cover in this video. So alright guys, that's going to be it for this tutorial. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.